mit der Akzeptanz der vier Grundfreiheiten und dazu gehört auch die Freizügigkeit der Personen. Brexit means Brexit.
Hello and welcome to another Brexitometer brought to you by the Martin Center. I'm Angelos and I'm joining you from King's College London. London today is cold, rainy, grey, grim and generally miserable. Kind of like how the Eurosceptic wing of the Conservative Party in Theresa May's government is feeling this week as they're trying to digest and absorb what exactly was agreed last week between Theresa May and the EU. Finally, there is a Brexit divorce agreement, which means we're all ready to go and to move forward to discussing the future relation between the UK and the EU, right? Actually, not so much. There are still important questions to be asked, mostly because the UK still hasn't made up its mind about A, how it feels about last week's agreement, and B, where exactly it is that it wants to move forward. We will explore these and other issues in this Brexitometer. The first question comes from Monique Sabi, who simply just posted the link to the agreement between Theresa May and the EU last week and a question mark. Now, Monique, I think your question mark pretty much speaks about how everybody feels in London. Now, first of all, to the more simple issues. When it comes to the so-called divorce bill, the UK pretty much accepted almost everything that the EU wanted from it. The UK will continue paying into the EU budget in 2019 and 2020 as if it were a member, and it will also continue funding future liabilities that it has already signed up on. Experts say that it's going to be something between 40 and 45 billion euros, but we don't know exactly, but that's pretty much what we're talking about. On citizens' rights, pretty much the UK is guaranteeing the rights of everybody who is already in the UK, but in a key concession by the EU, ECJ judgments will not apply to issues of EU citizens in the UK after 8 years after the UK has left. So at least Theresa May can show to her Eurosceptic core in the Conservative Party, no more ECJ. That was a pretty big deal. Now moving to the question of Ireland, something that exploded over the last 2 weeks and became the #1 issue. The Irish government was adamant: no agreement, no divorce agreement, no progression to the next stage of Brexit unless we have clear assurances that no hard border is going to be erected again between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. The agreement, the text, is actually very, very ambiguous, and it seems like it has kind of squared the circle, but there are still important questions remaining moving forward. Theresa May basically had an almost impossible task. On the one hand, she had to show to the Europeans and to Ireland there will be no borders between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. She had to satisfy the Democratic Unionist Party, a small conservative Protestant party from Northern Ireland that is keeping her government in power, and to show that there's not going to be a border between the two Irelands, but there's also not going to be a border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. And she also had to satisfy her Conservative Party by sticking to her point that the UK at the end of this process is going to leave the customs union and the single market, both of which, if it happened, would actually mean a hard border in Ireland. Now, obviously, this seems like an impossible task. The text basically says that the UK accepts that there will have to be regulatory alignment between Northern Ireland and the rest of the island of Ireland, but if no agreement is reached at the end of the Brexit process, Northern Ireland will pretty much stay inside the customs union and the single market. And at the same time, the UK says that there will be no extra regulatory checks between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. This is a very, very, very important part of the deal, perhaps the most important, because it basically says that at the end of the process, if there is no agreement between the UK and the EU, and there is a prospect of a hard Brexit, as far as Northern Ireland is concerned, the default position is for it to stay in the customs union and the single market to avoid a hard border in Ireland. And at the same time, Theresa May has said that there will be no extra border regulatory checks between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. This basically means that thanks to Ireland, in case there is no solution at the end of this, the UK might actually end up staying in the single market and the customs union through the back door of Northern Ireland. It's a very, very important part of the agreement, and the Eurosceptic side of the Tory party is slowly realizing that it actually means that at the end of the process, the UK may end up staying in the EU in all but name. Our next question comes from Grażyna Bozic, who is asking what are the next steps now after this sufficient progress has been made, and also she's asking if Brexit can be stopped. Now, Grażyna, I think that everybody is pretty much willing to take a step back and get into a bit of a stage of hibernation, if you will. It is winter after all. I think after this divorce agreement, the UK is going to enter a period of internal discussion and dialogue about what it is that they want their future relationship to be with the EU. There's actually a lot of internal wrangling in the Conservative Party between those who want a close alignment with the single market and those who want a clean break. So actually the really difficult part is now starting for Theresa May, as she's trying to breach the views of the two different sides of her cabinet and her party. The EU is also going to take stock of the situation and probably come up with some negotiating guidelines, but in my prediction is that when the two sides come together again in spring, there's going to be another big disagreement about what it is exactly that they're discussing about. The big difference here is that the EU is only interested right now in discussing disengagement of the UK and a transitional period. The UK would like to think that it will start discussing some ambitious trade deal. The EU is going to tell them that there's not enough time to do this, and by the way, the EU only does trade deals with non-members, so the UK will have to be out of the EU first to start discussing a trade deal. So I think the next steps are actually going to be discussions about what exactly it is that we're negotiating, and then ultimately a final quick dash to negotiate some transitional period in the run-up to March 2019, when the UK has said that it has to leave. Can Brexit be stopped? I think that last week's agreement, the divorce agreement, pretty much shows that the UK will ultimately cave in to avoid a no-deal Brexit. And if there is no-deal Brexit, I think there is no cliff edge whereby the UK might actually step back. It's a bit of a bittersweet moment for people in the UK who want the UK to stay close to the EU. These people would like ideally for Brexit to be stopped, but with every agreement along the way, the process of the UK leaving the EU becomes smoother and smoother. And I think this is what happened last week. Last week, Theresa May pretty much said that on account of Ireland, there might probably be a soft Brexit at the end of the process. With a soft Brexit, the blow is not going to be that hard, which actually means that very few people in the UK actually have the incentive to say, okay, let's stop this altogether. So I think paradoxically, the agreement last week makes soft Brexit more probable, but it also makes Brexit overall more probable, or it makes no Brexit even less probable than what it was before. Not everything about Brexit is last week's agreement. SmartBee Solutions on Twitter is asking a very important question, not least important for me and everybody who's working in education and universities in the UK. What is the future of educational cooperation, and will it affect PhD programs and researchers who want to come and study in the UK from Europe? Not much is going to change for at least during the transition period. If most people agree that the transition period is going to be 2 years, I think we should not expect a lot of changes between now and 2021. There are a lot of issues and a lot of parameters that go into the question of PhDs and research cooperation between the UK and the EU. Immigration is one thing. What will be the status of Europeans moving into the UK to do research after 2021? My expectation is that in education there might be some kind of the Swiss model. And in the Swiss model, Switzerland has specific sectoral agreements with the EU. Probably they will end up with some kind of sectoral agreement on education between the EU and the UK. But again, I'm not sure about this. I think that the most we can say and the most we can be confident about is that things will stay pretty much the same. Status of people moving in, tuition fees and so on. They're going to stay pretty much the same for a transition period up until 2021. So that was the end of Brexitometer number 11. It's actually been a full Brexitometer year. 2017 is coming to a close. We started back in January 2017 with Theresa May, strong and stable. No deal is better than a bad deal. It feels like a century ago, right? I'm really looking forward to continuing this in 2018. Brexit is not going anywhere. So for me, I can only wish you a happy holiday, a happy new year. We're gonna be back sometime in January. In the meantime, don't forget to send me your questions using the hashtag Brexitometer on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until then, take care, enjoy your holidays, and don't think about Brexit too much, but keep thinking about it just a little bit. Take care.
Mit der Akzeptanz der 4 Grundfreiheiten und dazu gehört auch die Freizügigkeit der Person. Brexit means Brexit.